What or who has contributed most to your success as an advocate?
That was the easiest question of all, because when I started practicing, I've only been able to get one job ever at the law firm I'm still with. My practice was going for like 13 years, and that was a great experience, and he had a tremendous influence on me and how I practice, and he started representing the tribes, like I said, in 55, so that was the easy question.
Well, wow. Well, I hate to give this person too many pats on the back. He's had many, but probably my early beginning as a lawyer in the DA's office in Oregon City. And I had the esteemed Ralph Holman as the presiding judge. And he was harsh and smart, but also understanding. And he gave me many good tips after I tried the case in his courtroom, always afterwards. And I think that schooling, if you will, was probably the major contributing factor to my success.
I would say having the opportunity to clerk for Judge Kilkenny, who was a real mentor for me, and even though I'm supposed to be doing research, he would bring me in the courtroom to see some of the better lawyers. And at that time, I thought the best thing to do would be to copy these people, and then I found out later that you really can't copy somebody else, even though you can see what works for them and what doesn't work, but you have to develop your own style. And then later in my practice, to have the opportunity to, as I'm sure you did, Peter, the opportunity to have to practice with good lawyers and not just be hanging out my shingle and flying my own flag. I'm very supportive of going into a firm with good lawyers and getting that bringing up, so to speak, sort of apprenticeship.
If I had to name a single person, it would be Robert P. Jones, former judge, state court judge Bob Jones. He and I practiced law for a number of years together. He was a great mentor and a very patient teacher for young lawyers. And I learned a lot from Bob, and I won't forget. I didn't forget it. I hope I didn't forget it.
I would say that there have been a number of people and experiences over the years that have influenced me. But if I had to pick out a couple of folks, it would be my father and Sid Lezak. My father was a lawyer. Like me, he was a prosecuting attorney for a number of years and a criminal defense lawyer. Sid Lezak, as we all know, was the U.S. Attorney in Oregon for many years, hired me as an assistant United States attorney when I was working with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. We made the trip out here, never regretted for a minute we came to Oregon. And Sid and my dad were men of integrity who led by example. They both had a passion for justice. It wouldn't occur to either of them to ever do anything that wasn't absolutely right. And that's about as good as I can say.
Well, if I did have success as an advocate, and I guess I have to leave that for others to judge, I thought about that this morning, and I started thinking about individual lawyers and non-lawyers that I've known. There are simply too many. I had so much help from so many people that I'm not going to single out any one person. I really think the entire court family, the Bar Association, defense counsel, people who run the courts, the judges, the court staff, all were a huge help. And all at many times were hugely patient with me when I stumbled. And I owe all of those folks a great debt of gratitude. Also, my parents, who I was the first in my family to go beyond high school, who encouraged me to go on to college and then to law school. My sweet Italian mother giving me words of encouragement, my Irish father letting me know it better happen or the consequences would be dire. But it was a nice mixture, and I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. certainly my friends and colleagues in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I say that not because they happen to be members of the same office I was, or that because of that they're smarter or better lawyers, but because those were the folks that I talked to every day. And for trial lawyers, having a cadre of friends and colleagues is hugely important. To test ideas, to make sure you're staying on the right path, to check you when you're not, and to encourage you when you are, is just hugely important. And lastly, my sweet wife Julie, and my children, Jossie the eldest, Paul my middle son, and Bradley, who were always patient with me when trial times came around and I was probably less than attentive and distracted. And finally to our 3 dogs, Bo and Tilly, who are now gone, Ruby, who is now with us, because I complained most to them about all the silly rulings that judges in this district would make. And it was a blessing because, of course, they didn't speak. They could never call the judges and let them know. But in all seriousness, I was blessed with a lot of very, very fine judges who were always kind, as were all the folks that I dealt with as a lawyer. My colleagues, the defense bar, it's just been a wonderful ride, a wonderful story, and probably proof of the old maxim of that wonderful jurist from Texas, Jerry Jeff Walker, who said, stories can come true, you just got to live your life in episodes. So.
Probably the people that influenced me the most were Bill Morrison, Walt Cosgrave, and Howard Beebe. And I remember Bill Morrison called me in one time when I was about ready to be a partner. He said there were basically 3 rules that I should follow. One was never steal your client's money. 2, don't fool around with your secretary. And 3, in the case of your people being Irish, don't drink. And after 54 years, I followed and listened carefully to those rules, and I can assure you I've never stolen money from a client.
I'll tell you what I think has. I got to try a lot of cases as a deputy DA back in the 60s. I mean, we tried lots of cases, and you learn how to stand on your feet, talk to a jury. So I attribute a lot of it to the experience and training I had. And then I got a chance to work with some pretty good lawyers too. And you know many of them. We just saw Tom Cooney. Tom trained me. And so I attribute a lot to the chance I got to work with good lawyers and to try cases as a young, starting out trial lawyer.
Okay. You asked me that question in the letter you sent, and I talked with a friend of mine that knows me better than I know myself. And he said the first thing in your life is your father. My father died when I was 12. And now that I look back on our relationship, because he was 45, he died in an accident. He was a lawyer, and a very successful trial lawyer. In the days, he was in the district attorney's office from 1915 to 1918, and then he did much private practice, part of which was in both the criminal and the civil courts, which was more common then than it is now. And he, from what, I remember Bill Morrison. You remember Bill Morrison. Mm-hmm. He remembered my dad. He was a friend of him, and he was old enough to pass on to me things he remembered about my father. My father was an excellent orator, and he was an excellent organizer, and he was successful in the criminal courts as well as the civil court. When he died, my mother was wise enough to keep the image of his position as a lawyer. It stimulated me to want to be a lawyer. And he took me, now that I think of it, I couldn't have been any older than 12 and a half when he died. He took me to courtrooms and he introduced me to people, took me out to lunch. I mean, and now that I think of it, how did he do that? He took me to a trial of 32 defendants in the old federal courthouse, which is now the Pioneer Courthouse, with Judge McNary. Those 32 defendants were all charged with criminal conspiracy to violate the Volstead Act, the Prohibition law. And my father told me not to take a young kid and do this for him. He said, "No, I'm not going to say a thing in this court. There's 32 defendants, and if I don't do anything, they might just forget my defendants. And by gosh, that's what happened." And I said, maybe there's an advantage in some cases to keep your mouth shut. I don't know, I could go on.
That's
Then I
perfect.
worked with General Tooze when I was an insurance adjuster. And have I gone too long here?
No, that's fine.
He was an inspiration to me. He was
Right.
a right man and a real patriot. And there were a host of others.
You know, two ends of the Oregon State Bar, Walter Cosgrave and Burl Green, I would say, taught me a great deal. I've tried cases with and against both of them, and they taught me a great deal about how to try a case, how to get along with opposing counsel, to fight in the courtroom and then go out and have a drink or play golf after it's all over with, and not indulge in the petty experience that too many of us experience today, where we find that the opposing counsel is our enemy. The opposing counsel is doing his or her job, and I think it's important to understand and realize that.
You know, I've reflected upon that, and I have a group of young lawyers, about 25 of them I've adopted. I call them the SOB, Sons of Bill, and Dobbs, Daughters of Bill. And I handpicked the three people that are still living that I think inspired me. And they are Judge Leavy, Chief Justice Ed Peterson, retired, and Don Marmaduke. And I think, and those just happen to be the ones that are closest to me now. There are many others, and in fact, I'd like to go out of my way to say this gentleman, John Ryan, is a very, very special man that's blessed my profession with so many of the intangibles, apart from an obvious quick wit and an Irish sense of humor. Those are those intangibles of character, your EQ rather than your IQ. And when you're blessed with that, with the love of people, I think you've got a heck of an alloy.
Well, from a lawyer standpoint, I think going to work for a firm that was solely involved in the profession of trying lawsuits and working for General Tooze, General Lamar Tooze, his son Lamar Tooze, and mainly Ed Peterson, who I started out being a business tax lawyer for a couple of years, and besides Lamar Tooze telling me that was the most boring field there was in law, Ed Peterson convinced me to try cases, and I tried many cases with him, which was how I learned how to do it. And then I would say one thing, since he's a good friend of yours and a very good friend of mine, is that whenever I had a case, I bounced it off of Skip Frank, and he always gave me the golden nugget of the trial, even though he didn't try many cases himself.
Good.
I'd say those are the people that.
Well, I would have an awful hard time saying who, because there have been so many people, and I'm very grateful to them. I'd have to say that really observations of those that are my colleagues and those that have been my adversaries has really been the primary way that I've learned. But I've also done quite a bit of reading, and I've been very interested in reading works that Herbert Stern has written called Trying Cases to Win. I have his 5 or 6 volume set, and I've read them. And I guess you respond to people who say things that you tend to think ring true, and he does. And I've learned a lot from what he's written, and I'm sure that there are others that I haven't read that I should read.